When you think of Queen Victoria, you probably picture the prim, proper, moral monarch who presided over a vast and glorious empire. She was the face of piety, family values, and British strength. But behind that carefully polished image of Victorian respectability, there's a much darker story. A secret business that hooked millions of people, brought an entire nation to its knees, and was enforced by the full power of the British military. Because in the 19th century, the British Empire became the biggest and most successful drug cartel the world has ever known. This is the story of how the British government, all in the name of the Queen, became the world's #1 drug pusher and went to war, not for land or for freedom, but for the right to sell poison. And it all started with something surprisingly simple: a cup of tea. By the early 1800s, Britain was completely obsessed. Tea wasn't just for the wealthy anymore, it was the national drink, loved by everyone from lords to laborers. The problem? China was pretty much the only place to get it, and the Chinese just weren't interested in buying anything Britain was selling. For hundreds of years, China had been an economic titan, almost totally self-sufficient. For their tea, silk, and porcelain, they wanted one thing: silver. This created a huge trade imbalance. So much silver was flowing out of Britain and into China that it threatened to empty the entire British treasury. Britain desperately needed to find a product that the Chinese would buy, something to get that silver flowing back. They needed something the people couldn't resist. They found their answer growing in the poppy fields of British-controlled India: opium. The British East India Company, which was less a company and more a corporate state with its own army, took over opium production. They created a total monopoly, forcing Indian farmers to grow poppies and processing the opium into a potent, smokable drug specifically designed for the Chinese market. And here's the thing: opium was completely illegal in China. The Qing emperor had banned it repeatedly, knowing exactly how destructive it was. But that didn't bother the British merchants. With a nod and a wink from their government, they started smuggling chests of opium into China, using a network of paid-off officials and local criminals. It was a criminal enterprise on a massive industrial scale. The effect on China was catastrophic. What started as a trickle of smuggled opium turned into a flood. By 1839, millions of Chinese citizens, from peasants in the fields to officials in the court, were addicted. The very fabric of society started to tear apart. Productivity collapsed as people were lost to the opium pipe. Families were ruined. Crime skyrocketed. In some coastal regions, addiction became so rampant it felt like it touched nearly every family. China wasn't just losing its silver anymore, it was losing its vitality. But for Britain, the trade was unbelievably profitable. By the late 1830s, opium wasn't just balancing the trade deficit, it was paying for Britain's entire supply of tea, with plenty left over. The drug that was destroying China was now directly bankrolling the administration and expansion of the British Empire. The Chinese Emperor Daoguang was watching his country crumble. In desperation, he appointed a trusted official, Lin Zexu, with one mission: wipe out the opium trade for good. Lin was a man of incredible integrity. He went to work immediately, arresting thousands of dealers and confiscating their pipes. Then, in 1839, he made his most audacious move. He blockaded foreign traders in the port of Canton and demanded they surrender their entire inventory of opium. He seized over 20,000 chests, more than 1,000 tons of the drug. Then, he had it all destroyed in a public ceremony, mixing it with lime and salt and washing it out to sea. In a final, remarkable act, Lin wrote an incredible letter directly to Queen Victoria, ruler to ruler. He appealed to her conscience, pointing out that Britain itself strictly controlled opium because its dangers were well known. "Since then, you do not permit it to injure your own country," he wrote. "You ought not to have the injurious drug transferred to another country. Where is your conscience?" There is no record that the Queen ever received the letter, let alone replied. Back in Canton, the British merchants were furious about their destroyed property. They sailed back to London and lobbied the government, screaming for compensation. They expertly reframed the debate. This wasn't about drug running, they argued. It was about free trade and an insult to British national honor. Persuaded by the powerful businessmen and eager to force China's markets open, the British government declared war. In 1839, a fleet of modern British warships appeared off the Chinese coast, starting what we now call the First Opium War. It was a horribly one-sided fight. British gunships leveled coastal forts, and their professional troops crushed the Qing armies. China was totally defeated. The war ended in 1842 with the Treaty of Nanking, and the terms were humiliating. China had to pay a massive sum for the opium they had destroyed, give the island of Hong Kong to Britain, and open 5 more ports to foreign merchants. The opium trade, the reason for the entire war, wasn't even mentioned, and so it continued. For the British Empire, the war was a spectacular victory. The opium business exploded, becoming a pillar of the imperial economy. It's estimated that opium revenue made up as much as 15 to 20% of the total income of British India. This narco fortune helped pay for the Royal Navy, run the colonies, and support the luxurious lifestyles of Britain's elite. But back home, the war was deeply controversial. A young politician named William Gladstone stood up in Parliament and called it a war more unjust in its origin, a war more calculated in its progress to cover this country with permanent disgrace. But his voice, and others like it, were drowned out by the roar of profit and empire. Britain presented itself to the world as a great civilizing force, bringing Christianity and progress to the ignorant masses, all while its pockets were being lined by forced addiction. So, let's get back to that big question. Was Queen Victoria, the woman who defined an era of supposed morality, personally a drug lord? The short answer is no. There's no proof Victoria was involved in the daily planning of the opium business. As a constitutional monarch, her ministers in Parliament and the powerful East India Company made those decisions. She reigned, but she didn't rule. But the real answer is more complicated. She was the head of the empire that did this. The war was fought in her name. The profits poured into her government's bank accounts, strengthening the throne she sat on. While she wasn't personally ordering the shipments, she was the ultimate beneficiary and the symbol of an empire that was, for all practical purposes, a state-sponsored drug cartel. Calling her the biggest drug dealer in history is a metaphor, but it's a powerful one for capturing the hypocrisy and the sheer scale of what was done under her reign.